What's going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams here at the distance. My bad. Kind of getting comfortable here. Just got home from work and just read some news, some very interesting news. Since I do like to talk about boxing news on here, and it's part of my channel. It's talking about boxing news, and I'm trying to make kind of the transition to return full time, along with work and stuff. And I haven't really had a chance to read much of the boxing news today. Because I've been very busy at work today, setting things up and installing software and all that stuff, and the great job of being a computer technician. Not so fun. Sometimes it is fun, good way to burn time, but I didn't really get a chance to read the news until about a second or two ago, and I read about Zab Judah now being trained by Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. And overall, we all know Zab Judah is coming back in the next, I believe, next month, fighting on ESPN Friday Night Fights, and he'll be returning next month after not fighting for a while. He's had a couple layoffs in the last few years. Been kind of inactive compared to the past years. He's been a bit inactive, and pretty much his entire career he's been trained by his father, Yoel Judah. And we saw in the documentary on HBO that Panama Lewis, probably one of the most corrupt fucking trainers of all time. And you could bring up, the incidents with, Aaron Pryor and Alexis Arguello in the first fight with the bottle incident, and that dirty ass incident from years ago when I forgot the dude's name, Billy Collins had gotten the shit beat out of him by Luis Resto. So now Zab Judah is being trained by Eddie Mustafa Muhammad after he had, and actually the thing with Panama Lewis was advising him. So that was that there. And now he's being trained by Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Overall, it's a okay move. It's not. I don't think that Eddie Mustafa Muhammad is the trainer for him. If you look at fights, because he does train Chad Dawson. Look at Chad Dawson fights. He doesn't. There are times that Eddie Mustafa Muhammad doesn't seem to be able to keep Chad Dawson focused at times. Because if you look at Chad Dawson fights, Chad Dawson could dominate for about the first 7, 8 rounds, and then he tends to kind of move around and not do as much in the later rounds than he would do in the earlier rounds, and fight a little bit different because he would get a little bit bored. And Zab Judah is the type of fighter, the first 4 or 5 rounds he fights very well, but he tends to slack off in the later stages of the fight, and that's kind of been the story of his whole entire career. And that can even date back to '98 when he fought Mickey Ward. That was another fight. He was simply dominating, but his attack pretty much went down towards the end of that fight. The Mayweather fight was on the attack in the earlier rounds, but it ended up getting outpointed. And other fights, there's a couple other fights I could think of. The fight against Joshua Clottey was another perfect example. He came out in that fight and fought very well in the opening rounds, and then just tended to wear down. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, at one time, I believe, is one of the best light heavyweights of all time. One of the best. But training wise, I don't feel as if he's a trainer. I feel that Eddie Mustafa Muhammad is more of a cheerleader than a trainer. If you listen to what he says, and really the only fighter I've seen him train is Chad Dawson. Chad Dawson's a guy who comes out, southpaw fighter. Chad Dawson comes out, he boxes very well, and he cheers him on rather than more so than he trains him. And Zab Judah is the type of fighter that you don't want to be a cheerleader for. You don't want to be a cheerleader for Zab Judah. You want to be a trainer for him. And there are many people out there that, and I think what Zab Judah needs, despite being under his father for X amount of years, he needs a strict disciplinarian. He needs somebody that's going to keep him focused and keep him disciplined. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad is not that trainer that's going to keep him focused, keep him motivated, and have him do the things he needs to do to to pretty much get over certain slumps in fights. And in certain fights, we haven't really seen Chad Dawson in trouble other than the Glenn Johnson fight, the first one. We hadn't really seen Chad Dawson in that much trouble. So we don't really know. We really don't know the kind of the lines to where Eddie Mustafa Muhammad can help Zab Judah, because pretty much the fight we've seen him train, hasn't really been in trouble. And don't get me wrong, this first fight, I believe that this first fight is going to be very misleading to those who believe that Eddie Mustafa Muhammad is going to change Zab Judah's career. I do believe this is going to be very misleading, because I believe the dude's name is Jose Santa Cruz or something like that. Never heard of the fighter. I think it's just a fight to showcase Zab Judah on ESPN. That's just my personal opinion. I think it's just a fight to showcase Zab Judah. I think personally at this point, Zab Judah could still contend at the welterweight level. I think he could still contend at the welterweight level, and possibly even become a titleist again, depending on who he fights. I do believe that the IBF, I believe he could give a great showing against the IBF champion, and I believe that he does still give some of the top welterweights a little bit of trouble with that fast southpaw style, along with that speed, having power in his shots. So, to be quite honest, I do believe that this first fight is going to be misleading, and sometimes when specific fighters go and they change trainers at a certain point of their career, it's too late. It's simply too late, and it depends on who you're in the ring with. Like with Ricky Hatton and Floyd Mayweather Sr. Ricky Hatton and Floyd Mayweather Sr. Everybody was talking about. There was a lot of people talking about how, especially the Pacquiao haters, were talking about how Mayweather Sr. was going to help Hatton lead Hatton to victory, when pretty much probably 90% of the people out there knew Manny Pacquiao was going to win this fight regardless of who was in his corner. And he fought Paulie Malignaggi, and everybody's talking about, wow, he dominated Malignaggi. And Malignaggi's a smaller fighter with a slick style compared to, just like Floyd Mayweather. And then he fights Manny Pacquiao on the big stage again, and he was knocked out in 2 rounds. And you could also bring it up with, and sometimes and another way of finding a new trainer being misleading is Oliver McCall in 1994, when Manny Stewart was in his corner for that one fight against Lennox Lewis, and he threw that shot with his eyes closed and knocked him out. And the next time we hear from Oliver McCall, he's crying in the ring in the rematch against Lennox Lewis in 1997. And another one kind of gone bad was Roy Jones leaving Alton Murchison. Actually left his father first, went to Alton Murchison, and went back to his father. That was another one that was kind of gone bad. But at the same time, these fighters had performances that were very misleading. And I think Zab Judah going to Eddie Mustafa Muhammad is another one that will be very misleading. So anyway, thanks for watching. That was Distance. Peace.